fellas, it's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS fades and sleepers for this week's Rocket Mortgage Classic. It's Wednesday, which means we're able to take on ownership, game theory, all the intricacies and nuances that come along with playing PGA DFS, and more importantly, how to take down these large field contests where you have 20,000 to 100,000 other entries to compete against. In those type of contests, who you're playing is important, but more importantly, how you're actually putting those players together can be arguably even more important. So going to touch on 3 of the quote-unquote overhyped plays this week, guys that I think are getting a little bit too much attention around DFS circles. Those are going to be my fades. And then afterwards, going to touch on some of the diamonds in the rough, perhaps the 3 players that are being the most underhyped this week that I expect to have plenty of upside in these large field tournaments and might be able to give you some much needed ownership leverage. So a lot to talk about here. It is my favorite video to do week in and week out. Let's go ahead and get this thing started. We'll go ahead and start this thing off with our fades this week, where my number 1 fade is going to be Will Zalatoris at $10,400. And now there's a few reasons for this, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Billy Z fan, particularly on a difficult golf course, but this week at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, it couldn't be any more different than the type of track I'm looking to target him at. So let's start with the key metrics that really don't go his way. So first and foremost, shots gained putting. He is an inconsistent putter at best, and when we've gotten him on this bent POA surface, it has not been his best track record. You can see losing rate around 0.35 shots per round, but on top of that, he struggles in that 5 to 10 foot range, also that 10 to 15 foot range, which are going to be key for going out there and getting to something like 20 to 25 under par. On top of that, I do expect him to still be popular. You can see I have him projected for 18.3% projected ownership, but more importantly than anything, guys, this is a week once again where pretty much every ownership site I've seen throughout the industry is under projecting the top. When you take their average salary, take the actual percentage they're being used in lineups, multiply it by their salary used, you're getting something close to like $47,000 or even just $48,000 for a lot of the major competitors out there. Now, I'm not going to name names, but when you do so, you're going to underproject the field. People use all of their salary when it comes to PGA DFS. Now, in other sports, there might be a few examples where people might be more willing to leave 500 to 1,000 on the table, particularly for something like Football Showdown or something like that. But PGA DFS specifically, pretty much everybody uses their salary. So, 18.3% is actually relatively low. There's guys like Patrick Cantlay, Tony Finau that are well higher owned than somebody like Will Zalatoris. But because of the fact that there's not that many options above $8,000, you're going to see very condensed ownership. So even somebody like Willie Z that isn't really being talked up by many, I can see actually quite a bit of a negative sentiment around the industry with his play. He's not going to be 5% owned. You can see I still have him at 18.3%. And to get adequate leverage this week, you're looking to have to invest at least 35, maybe even 40% of your lineups into him. And that is something that I'm just not willing to do here. Sorry about that. There were some pesky leaf blowers going off. Might happen again if you hear another cut in the video. But I also wanted to mention with Will Zalatoris that with the course history, it also isn't ideal. And I know it's just a 1 round or 1 year sample size with Willie here, but he finished in 77th place, right? Last year was coming in with all the momentum in the world, was getting a lot of steam by people at this event because of how, high his birdie or better percentage was last year. And sure, when Willie's making putts, he's going to post 6-7 birdies in a round, but that's really something that you don't see consistently from him. And last year, though he made the cut, he finished in 77th place, so was just middling throughout the weekend. And honestly, if you're going to have to find any reason to fade somebody, that's going to be it for me. I mean, even with Tony Finau, right? A 53rd place finish in 2020, that's not ideal, right? And I know Patrick Cantlay, Cameron Young don't have any history here at all, but I'd rather see that than somebody that just hardly makes the cut, especially for one of these elite tier options. But moving on to our next fade, it's going to be last year's winner, somebody who won me an insane amount of money at this event. I won him on an outright ticket. I placed $250 on it as well. Not even one of the largest sports bet that I've ever won, period, at least for a single bet. I've won more in a DFS contest from GPPs, but from an outright perspective, that's the biggest bet that I've ever had in my life and probably will for quite some time. I'm not somebody who's betting $1,000 on outrights, at least not very often, right? I'll do it from time to time, especially if it's a late ad there on Saturday or Sunday. But with Cameron Davis at 96 $9,700. He's playing in the AM wave, which if there was going to be an advantageous wave, it would be the AM PM wave. So that's actually something that helps the case with him. And actually with Willie Z, I should have mentioned that. Something that actually hurts his chances this weekend. But Cameron Davis is not a $9,700 golfer, particularly in this type of field. Last year, he was $7,300. He was cheap. I talked him up as a value pick. He was also only rated around 10% owned, and that was after getting a lot of steam with the community. This year, I have him at 18.6% when it comes to his ownership, and he's nearly $2,000, actually a little bit more than $2,000 more expensive. You're talking about a completely different argument here. And somebody like Cam Davis that has the high birdie or better percentage, also a great putter on that bent POA surface, at least comparatively. On other surfaces, he's a loser for his career. On this surface, you can see he's a slight gainer, a marginal gainer, 7/100ths of a stroke per round. But I'm not playing $9,700 for him, and I'm certainly not playing him at 35 to 40% of my lineups, because just like Billy Z, to get that adequate leverage, you're going to have to play him in at least 36%, if not closer to 40 to 45%, to get a true, significant amount of leverage to the field there. So $9,700, I'm definitely out on Cam Davis, and I don't think we need to talk about it all that much. He's played well of late, but something to consider is that his recent form, and this is definitely going to be the case with the next fade too, is a lot due to the events that he's playing. So let's look at it. First off, 3M Open, that wasn't the strongest field, right? Top 20 finish, whatever. You can give him a little bit of credit there. But top 10 at the Barracuda, top 10 at the John Deere Classic, I mean, it's not necessarily world beater type of fields. I mean, especially there at the John Deere, and even more so at the Barracuda Championship. I don't know how much we want to look into those numbers. I mean, you can see Travelers, right? Pretty comparative field to what we're going to have this week. He finished in 57th. Memorial, pretty strong field, 53rd. It's not like he's missing cuts. Obviously, he's been pretty consistent over the last few months, but when you get him in a relatively competitive field, he shows his pedigree, right? He's not going out there and finishing top 5, top 10 anymore. It's usually something like top 25 at the very best. I'm not investing $9,700 into that type of player. That's ridiculous. When you have guys around him who have legitimate chances of winning this week or finishing in the top 5 at the very least. And lastly, the last fade I'm getting to isn't quite as high owned, but it's just another example of a guy who's overpriced. And it's due to his recent results, which are at low quality fields. So let's take a look at it, right? The recent form. Down here at $8,000, Mark Hubbard, top 5 at the Barracuda Championship. Again, that field was absolutely atrocious. I mean, you had guys finishing in the top 10 that had absolutely no business of doing so. Top 3 at the Barbasol. Oh, wow. Another event with an absolutely atrocious field, right? An alternate field event. John Deere Classic, 13th place finish. We've already talked about how weak that field was. 46th at the Travelers. That's a real event. Oh, he came back down to earth. That's not all that surprising to me. RBC Canadian. Another event with a legitimate field. Oh, 44th place finish. Charles Schwab, 52nd. These are the type of guys that are overrated, right? Because people do box score watching and they don't consider the field at hand. If you put everyone on the same playing field, regardless of the actual field they're playing in, you're not doing your analysis the right way. You need to be accounting for that, weighting it in one fashion or the other. A good way to do it is just go up based on strength of field. It's a good way to quantify that if you're looking to do your own analysis. But somebody like Mark Hubbard, who, if you just look at the pure shots gained metrics, he looks like a world beater right now, right? Gaining 0.7 shots per round on approach, 0.59 shots per round with his putting. That's because of the fields that he's in, right? You have guys priced around him like a Siwoo Kim, Chris Kirk, for example, who's playing in major championships, all the biggest events. Obviously, guys like Gary Woodland, Russell Henley, also playing in much higher quality fields. Their shots gained metrics might not be as attractive as somebody like a Mark Hubbard, but there's a reason for that. And for some of them, they do have just the same type of shots gained metrics, but with the type of fields that they were competing against, I'd argue that they're a lot more impressive, and not marginally more impressive, a lot more impressive, because they're on more difficult golf courses and against stronger fields. So for guys like Mark Hubbard that are just like the model play of the week, you can see my model loves him, still has him at number 6 in the field. It's skewed because of that recent data. So he's going to be 13, maybe even 15% owned this week. If people get enthralled with playing Mark Hubbard, I'm going to have 0%. It'll be a relatively easy fade for me. Little quick mid-video plug here. If you're looking for access to all of my ownership projections and all of the modeling you see on my screen that is blacked out, make sure to check out my Patreon page. A link is in the description of this video. It is $10 a month, and you get access to all of that, my prize picks, my spreadsheets for prize picks on hit rates, and of course, the community Discord where you can get access to one-on-one coaching with me, the rest of the community that has plenty of bright-minded, like-minded individuals out there that can help you with your lineups. You can toss ideas off of, all that sort of fun stuff. Again, all with my Patreon page, so make sure to check it out if you're looking for access to all that I have to offer. Now moving on to the sleeper picks. So time to stop being negative. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the diamonds in the rough that I will be playing this week, which at number one, we're going to have Kevin Kisner at $9,100. Now he's in the quote-unquote disadvantageous wave, right? He's in the PM-AM split. Now, I do expect it to be a little bit of an advantage to be in the AM-PM wave, which if you want to see why, if you want to see the weather split tonight, make sure to stop on by for the live stream. That will be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. But Kevin Kisner loves the golf course. So let's take a look at that to start. So at $9,100, he finished in 8th last year, 3rd in 2020, at least made the cut in 2019. So over the years, at least after his first start here, was able to improve on that. And it makes sense from a course fit perspective. If you've seen my course breakdown, there are multiple ways to get it done here. The first way, bomb and gouge. Hit it out there, set up 75 to 100 yard shots in almost every single hole. And on the par fives, having that distance is extremely useful in getting home in two, or be extremely accurate. Take the Kevin Kisner, the Cameron Tringale approach, which have both been extremely consistent and successful at this golf course, and that is to hit a bunch of fairways and to hit a bunch of pitching wedges well. The 100 to 125 yard range. Now, it doesn't seem like a massive difference, but in terms of play style, one's a little bit higher upside. That's why guys like Bryson won this event. Also last year, Cameron Davis, another bomber, was able to win this event. But in terms of guys that have made the cut every year and finish in the top 10 to top 25, it's been those Kevin Kisner, Cameron Tringale type of players that have gone out there and been able to produce consistent results. So for somebody like Kisner, who's 13.6% owned, particularly if I'm playing in a single entry or a 2 to 3 max type of tournament, becomes extremely attractive to me because I think he's making the cut here pretty much every single time. He loves the golf course. He's at a part of the FedEx Cup points list where he doesn't need to win. He doesn't need a top 5 to get into the playoffs, but to solidify his spot in the top 30, perhaps get to East Lake, he needs to do some damage here. I mean, these are his type of events. This week, next week at the Wyndham Championship, he is going to be licking his chops. So Kevin Kisner at $9,100. I understand he's probably a little bit more expensive than you'd like him to be, but that's just the strength of field here, right? You're going to see a few players that are a little bit higher priced than you're used to seeing them, and that's just a byproduct of the lack of choices. So and if that's going to keep him relatively low owned with his elite course history, then I'm going to be a buyer there, and even out of the bad wave. If anybody can deal with the wind, he's relatively skilled at flighting his golf ball. I don't think it's going to bother him all that much. Next up, we've got Denny McCarthy at $8,900. And the fact that he's only 13.5% owned, to me, is a little bit ridiculous. I mean, first off, the best putter in the world, and we're at a putting fest, a birdie fest at that, and he's coming in with solid ball striking form. You can see he's number 7 in the field in terms of total mono ranking here. So he's playing in the advantageous wave. We'll have the AM-PM split, and more than that, right, the shots gained metrics have been there. He's gaining in every category but off the tee. But the one thing with his off the tee play, right, he gains because of he loses strokes off the tee because of a lack of distance. So kind of similar to a Kevin Kisner, he fits the mold of somebody who needs to hit a bunch of fairways around the Rocket Mortgage Classic, hit those 100 to 125 yard shots there to 10 to 15 feet and do his thing, which is make a whole lot more putts than the rest of the field. That type of skill set is, again, extremely consistent around this golf course. And for guys like Kisner and McCarthy that we could pretty much just bank on gaining a ton of strokes with the putter this week, they have a really high floor, right? So again, another guy in single entries or 2 to 3 max contests that I like as a default, but for large field GPPs, right, that's kind of the point of this video. He's still 13.5% owned. That makes no sense. Like, you'd think a consistent cash play almost type of guy would be one of the chalky plays on the slate, and that's just not the case right now. And if we're going to be getting that type of value, I'm going to be a huge buyer on somebody like Denny McCarthy. Alrighty, and the last sleeper pick we're going to touch on here is going to be none other than Webb Simpson at an even $8,300. Another player who's right around 13% owned. I have him at 12.4% as of right now. He's playing in the AM-PM wave, which, like we've mentioned a few times, is what I want to see. If anything, I'm not going to hold it against the guys in the PM wave. Plenty of them, like Kevin Kisner, can get out of there. But with Webb Simpson, just shots gained metrics starting to look like Webb of old. Like, we had the injury. He went through a stretch of golf where he was missing cuts when he was playing, needed to take some time to himself to actually fully heal. And at this point, I buy it, right? He's gaining a bunch on approach now. He's starting to gain off the tee, starting to be that tee to green player that we're used to seeing. And, with the putter, he goes on stretches where he'll be absolutely nuclear in that department. And over the years, one of the surfaces that has kind of brought that out for him has been that bent POA surface, where he's gaining close to 3/4 of a stroke per round. So somebody who fits that same Kevin Kisner type of mold, Cameron Tringale, obviously we just talked about Denny McCarthy a little bit there, where he's not going to beat this place with his distance, but perhaps that's why people are overlooking it, right? If you look at just the winners over the years, Bryson, Cameron Davis, like I mentioned, you're definitely going to funnel yourselves towards some of the longer players, but look at the top 5, look at the top 10 of all of those events. It's all guys like a Webb Simpson. Kevin Kisner's finished top 10 2 of the 3 years. Those shorter plotter type players that have been getting it done year after year. And really, in DFS, in the 8K range or even the 9K range, that's what we're looking for. We don't need the winner at that point, right? So if we're looking for top 10, top 5 equity, these are the type of players that I'm getting to in bunches. So 13%, 12.4% on what we have here with Webb Simpson is far too low in my opinion. I'm going to have upwards of 30, maybe even 35% in my player pool to try and get a bunch of leverage there because, I project him right now for something right around a top 20 finish. Somebody who is a great skill set fit here, is coming in with the ball striking form I'm looking for, and historically loves greens with this bent POA hybrid. So, what's not to like about Webb Simpson this week, particularly at low ownership? Alrighty, boys, that's all I've got for the fades and sleepers. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button, but also go ahead and comment down below who you're fading this week and also who your biggest sleeper pick is. We are going to have the DFS Livestream tonight, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. That will be at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, so make sure to stop on by with any questions that you have. We'll be touching on the weather, talking about any last-second adjustments in terms of stacking. We'll talk about some strategy talk, some of the chalk on the slate and how I'm handling it, and most importantly, all of your questions. So if you have any for this week, anyone you want a deep dive on, whatever the case may be, it can be strategy talk, just talk about golf in general, just asking me questions personally, whatever the case may be, it's your time. Questions are going to be answered, and let's go ahead and have a good time with it. So I'm looking forward to that, guys. Best of luck with all of your lineups for this week, and let's get this cash.